Hello, I'm Diana Skaya, and welcome to Ukraine This Week. This is your one-stop shop to take stock of all the developments on the political and literal battlefield. Now let's start with a review of the most important events of the past week, straight from Ukraine. Ukraine continues to endure relentless Russian attacks as drone strikes and missile waves claim lives and lay waste to infrastructure across the country. Now, with energy facilities now at risk as winter approaches, millions face the threat of prolonged power outages amid Russia's escalating campaign against civilians.
Last week ended with deadly shelling in Ukraine's Kherson region, claiming the lives of 5 people and leaving 4 others wounded. Among the casualties was an elderly man killed by an explosive dropped from a drone, while 4 others were slain by artillery fire. The violence showed no signs of stopping as the new week began. On Monday, Russian forces launched widespread attacks across Ukraine, killing at least 8 people and wounding 49 throughout the day. That night, Russia sent 48 drones, 26 of which Ukrainian air defenses managed to intercept and down across various regions. In Kiev, debris from a Russian UAV struck a 9-story apartment building in the Solomyansky district early Tuesday morning, damaging a gas pipe. The attack marked the 18th aerial assault on the capital since October began, but it would not be the last. The following day, Russia attacked a residential neighborhood in Kharkiv, killing a man and 2 boys aged 12 and 15 and wounding at least 35 others. The strike hit a 9-story building, collapsing the front from the 1st through the 5th floor. Reports indicated that Russia had used a high-explosive Fab 500 bomb, a weapon designed to destroy fortified structures and military targets. This was the same type of bomb used just 2 days prior to damage the Derzhprom, the state industry building, a historic landmark in Kharkiv under UNESCO protection since 2022. Completed in 1928, it was among Eastern Europe's first skyscrapers. Elsewhere, Russian strikes targeted Kryvyi Rih, killing several people and wounding over 20. By Friday, Ukrainian forces reporting having downed 31 of 48 drones as Russia's attacks continued, leaving 2 more dead and wounding 24 others. The last mass missile and drone assault on Kiev took place nearly 2 months ago. Yet, the seeming lull is met with unease among residents as they brace for attacks on critical infrastructure similar to last winter. If they intensify, Ukrainians could experience power outages lasting up to 8 hours on particularly critical days.
The pressure is mounting on Ukraine's eastern front, where a grueling attrition war continues unabated. Now, as a result, parts of the frontline city of Pokrovsk will be cordoned off as the defensive preparations are ramped up.
The city, a crucial logistics hub for Ukrainian forces, has been a focal point in Russia's ongoing offensive within the Donetsk region. Entry and exit routes are to remain open to some degree, but the authorities want residents to heed the restrictions.
Unfortunately, the situation has deteriorated in recent months. The artillery fire is getting worse. It is dangerous to stay in the city.
The announcement comes amid reports that Russian forces have captured Selidovo, a town located just 18 kilometers from Pokrovsk. While Ukrainian authorities have not officially confirmed the loss, independent experts suggest that Selidovo is effectively under Russian control, further endangering Pokrovsk. Already, the city's infrastructure is severely compromised. According to Mr. Dobryak, the infrastructure is 80% destroyed. Power supply reaches only 60% of Pokrovsk, while surrounding settlements and the town of Rodinske remain largely without electricity. Pokrovsk's population has dwindled from around 60,000 before Russia's invasion to roughly 11,900, with 55 children still among the remaining residents.
As the prospect of winter approaches, Ukraine faces the dual challenge of thwarting Russia's expected missile barrages targeting its infrastructure without the ability to strike deep into Russian territory with Western-supplied weapons. Now, Ukrainian officials say they have broadened the scope of their strikes beyond conventional military targets.
One such target is ethanol production, a key link in the manufacturing chain of many civilian and military goods. Ukrainian drones struck an ethanol plant in Russia's Voronezh region on October 27th, marking a new phase in Ukraine's strategic response to Russia's missile threat. The significance of this strike, though seemingly smaller than striking ballistic missile depots, is still considerable, as Russian military aviation cannot function without alcohol, not to be misunderstood as a jab at Russian pilots' drinking habits.
From fuel to braking systems, from liquids for technical needs, cleaning, to anti-icing agents. It's all alcohol.
This calculated approach, limited by international restrictions on Western-supplied arms, signals Kyiv's determination to defend its infrastructure from afar, within the confines they find themselves in.
In an effort to counterbalance the strengthening military ties between Russia and North Korea, Seoul is dispatching a high-level delegation to Ukraine. Now, its aim is to exchange intelligence on DPRK troops reported to be in Russia.
South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol expressed hopes that under the new leadership of Secretary-General Mark Rutte, NATO will take a stronger stance against illegal exchanges between Moscow and Pyongyang. The visit by South Korean defense and intelligence officials follows recent revelations that the DPRK has reportedly sent military personnel to assist Russia in its war effort.
The deployment of North Korean troops represents a significant escalation in the DPRK's ongoing involvement in Russia's illegal war.
Since the outset of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, Russia and North Korea have cemented their relationship, even signing a mutual defense pact this summer. Previously, Kyiv and some of its Western allies had accused Pyongyang of supplying weapons to Moscow, as North Korean-made ballistic missile fragments were found in Ukraine. The apparent presence of DPRK troops so far on Russian soil has sparked discussion within South Korea on amending existing laws to permit military support for Ukraine. This could provoke significant strategic shifts among NATO allies and partners in Asia.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy has signed a law enabling foreign nationals to serve as officers in the country's international legion. Now, this marks a very significant policy shift aimed at bolstering the ranks of the armed forces of Ukraine.
The new law allows non-Ukrainian nationals to hold officer ranks within the International Legion, a volunteer force established shortly after Russia's full-scale invasion in February 2022. Until now, foreign fighters could only serve as enlisted soldiers, limiting the scope of command and leadership roles available to experienced foreign military personnel willing to fight alongside Ukrainian forces. The government in Kyiv hopes this change will attract skilled international fighters with military leadership experience, further enhancing the Legion's effectiveness on the battlefield. The expansion of command roles to foreign nationals is expected to draw greater international expertise and support in Ukraine's fight against Russian forces. Making officer positions available to foreigners may also open the door for many fighter jet pilots from abroad.
Bipartisan leaders of the U.S. Helsinki Commission are calling on President Joe Biden to permit NATO member Poland to extend its air defense umbrella over Ukraine. Now, this unprecedented move would allow Warsaw to intercept Russian missiles as an act of self-defense, according to a letter obtained by The Hill.
The Commission's plea supports Poland's push to bolster its air defense capabilities, not only to protect its own airspace from potential Russian threats, but also to assist Ukraine in its defensive efforts. The request follows incidents that have heightened Poland's concerns about its security. In November 2022, 2 Polish farmers were killed when a strayed Ukrainian missile landed on Polish soil, and in March 2023, Russian missiles briefly crossed into Polish airspace while targeting Ukraine. Polish Foreign Minister Radosław Sikorski proposed the program in September, asserting that Warsaw has a duty to intercept Russian missiles over Ukraine before they threaten Polish airspace. Sikorski even commented on The Hill's publication. At TVP World, we have been investigating the nuances surrounding this issue to bring a comprehensive perspective to our viewers.
President Zelenskyy has asked Poland and others to potentially use their anti-air defense, if you will, to protect Ukrainian skies. From the United States' vantage point, would this be an escalatory move if, say, Poland was to shoot down rockets that could potentially, rockets, missiles, drones, that could potentially cross into its airspace?
This is crazy magical thinking. Look, yeah? I mean, what if Poland or other allies want to help Ukraine, give fires to Ukraine, give artillery to Ukraine, give an even better air defense system to Ukraine, or give aircraft to Ukraine. But this notion that, I mean, look at the ballistics. It doesn't make any sense. Poland's not going to be able to shoot down incoming threats to Ukraine from Polish territory. We're talking about hypotheticals here that don't make any sense. And the media tends to fixate on some of these things. And it's not to Ukraine's advantage, because what they need is capabilities on the front lines. We're all for Poland donating those sorts of capabilities, and our other allies. And that's, again, why President Biden has convened this meeting in Ramstein, to meet the Ukrainian needs as they are right now on the battlefield. We encourage all nations to show up with pledges of additional capabilities so that Ukraine can win this war.
Poland operates AWACS. I imagine they can see a lot of these airborne targets. How feasible is it that Polish forces could, in fact, protect some area of the Ukrainian skies from a pure military standpoint? Bar the political decision.
I'm putting aside all the political decisions, sensitivities,
Yes.
the facts that we, in this case, we might be considered, or the combatants as well, a part of the conflict. Militarily speaking, obviously there will be a lot of air defense threats that we would have to counter. So that would mean that potentially, just as it happened a long time ago over Bosnia when the American F-16 pilot was shot down, those threats will be there, and they will be very, very lively, both missile but also short-range air defense systems. So that's something that we as the military would have to take into account. The electronic warfare, the jamming basically, will be there. So there will be a number of serious threats that we would have to account. From the military, purely military point of view, this is feasible. I mean, the no-flying zones were imposed over different countries, but obviously different circumstances. It was not really an active war with a with the major power.
Despite this support, then NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg initially rejected the proposal, cautioning that such an action could risk drawing NATO directly into the conflict. The newly appointed head of the alliance, Mark Rutte, who assumed the office in October, has not yet addressed the issue. The appeal comes nearly on the eve of US presidential elections, scheduled for Tuesday, November 5th.
And joining me now on Ukraine this week is Gary Tabak, former chief of staff at the NATO military liaison mission in Moscow. Mr. Tabak, thank you so much for being with us here today on Ukraine this week.
Oh, I'm always happy to be on TVP. Thank you, Diana.
All right, so I first want to begin with a statement here by Republican Congressman Joe Wilson and his deputy Democrat Steve Cohen. They addressed a letter to U.S. President Joe Biden saying, I quote, "We're writing to strongly urge your administration to grant Poland the authority to intercept and neutralize missiles over Ukraine, especially those that are threatening to violate Polish airspace." Now, of course, Polish Foreign Minister Radosław Sikorski recently submitted a request in this regard, and we believe that providing this capability is a necessary step in defending NATO territory and securing one of our most important allies. Now, and of course, Minister Sikorski said that it's nice to have both the Democrats and Republicans support this Polish proposal. Now, sir, my question to you is, why has this appeal been made now, one might say, right on the eve of the U.S. presidential election?
Well, I'm not sure. I think Minister Sikorski would know better why it's done now, but it's not. To me, personally, it's not surprising because I've been, of course, watching and following what is going on there from the very beginning. And from the very first days of the war, when our ships were taken out of the Black Sea, when our embassy was taken out of Ukraine, when President Biden said if it's going to be not such a big incursion or invasion, it's not so bad, but if it's a large one, then yeah, it's not good. And when Poland was the first country, firstly, to absorb like 10 million refugees that were running away from the war, women and children, and Poland was the first country that offered MiGs to transfer MiGs to Ukraine so they could close their skies, that they could repel the Russian aggression. Our government, our administration said no and told Poland not to do that. So it's been, then there was a land lease, and then there were many, many other things. And it's not only politics, I think, that's involved here. It's got to be some kind of humanitarian involvement in it. It's got to be, we have to be responsible. They're killing children and women. they are just bombarded, and Kharkov, a building, it's a historical building that is protected by UNICEF, while the head of the United Nations, the Secretary General, is in Russia shaking hands with the guy with the, with Putin, who is also by the international court martial is accused of being a war criminal, and there's an order for his arrest, and the umbrella organization is there. So this is a little bit bizarre to begin with, and I think it's irresponsible for the West to do it, except Ukraine, except Poland. I don't think it's just now that they come out with it, and the Minister Sikorsky is saying it just now on time. I think it's been happening. Poland has been doing it throughout the war, trying to help and reach out, to help Ukraine and reach out to our NATO allies to take the same action. So Poland's been, at the tip of the spear, trying to do that. So to me, it doesn't sound like it's anything new. And yes, it is with the help of your colleagues, not TVP. Not referring to TVP, I believe that your station is one of the most objective ones, the non-biased one. But many reporters and many mass media has been, propagating that no, everything is being done for Ukraine. We're helping them. They got enough weapons. And so on and so on. It was only Poland that kept saying it. No, they need more. They need more. And maybe we should start shooting things down and covering Ukraine from that bombardment, from that barbaric neighbor that they have.
That's right. We'll get into that a little bit more detailed just a bit later. But going back to really the topic of the White House. Now, the heads of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Ministry of National Defense first spoke about that idea, of course, during the NATO summit that was held in Washington in July, right? But they emphasized that Poland would only be willing to do so, of course, in agreement with its allies. Now, the White House, again, was reluctant to accept that postulate. How does the White House view this appeal now? And again, I'm going back to the fact that we're just days away from these elections.
Yes, I think they're not going to do it. If they haven't really, it's almost 3 years. If the White House then done everything to assist Putin rather than to assist Ukraine and encourage our NATO allies to support Ukraine, they've done everything the opposite. Again, starting from the land lease, when Prigozhin was going and marching towards Moscow, it was our State Department, Secretary Blinken came that we have warned Ukraine not to take any kind of actions against Russia. Let Putin stabilize himself, and only then you can continue with the war. How ridiculous is that? So every time there was a Ramstein 1, Ramstein 25, and so on, they've been saying that they're going to do so much, and they allocated the money and the funds, but nothing really came. And the President Zelenskyy is now saying, oh, by the way, you've given us less than 10% of what you have promised, what has been allocated by the U.S. Congress and by NATO. So with this administration, I think Ukraine should not expect any kind of change, that things are not going to happen. And then I guess we will see what the outcome is going to be, whether it's going to, who wins the elections in the United States and who's going to be the next president. So maybe if there'll be a leadership change, and I mean leadership in a leadership style change in the White House, maybe things will be in our favor. But until the elections, I don't think anything will change, and Ukraine should not expect any kind of serious help. And the only thing I can say is that I'm glad that Poland has that stamina and that endeavor, to continue and push for assistance and trying to help their neighbor who's in big trouble. So I just think, to be honest with you, without being diplomatic, today's administration in the United States is not on the side of Ukraine. It's on the side of Putin. It is allying and aligning himself with Putin right from the beginning of the war, and even before, when the U.S. Congress offered and voted to provide lethal weapons to Ukraine, it was vetoed and there was an embargo by President Obama and Vice President Biden, and it was Trump who lifted it in 2017.
Right.
So, and then again, and then the sanctions against the Northern Stream were lifted right as soon as President Biden arrived in the White House. That's the first thing he did. So I think that there's more of a friendship towards Putin than towards Ukraine.
Mr. Tabak, let me ask you this now. So according to both these congressmen we're still talking about now, another thing they said is that enabling Poland, let's talk about the interception of missiles here. So they said in order to intercept missiles over Ukraine would not constitute an offensive act, but rather a key step in ensuring the security of NATO's eastern flank. Now, this action would strengthen NATO's deterrent posture while demonstrating, of course, that our collective determination to defend the alliance from further Russian aggression. Now, this seems to be a major point of contention as Ukraine's President Zelenskyy believes that Poland should protect, for example, gas storage facilities in eastern Ukraine, right, which NATO considers to be engaging NATO country into war. Now, what could be the consensus on this issue?
Well, then again, the consensus, I'm a military man. I don't look for consensus. We should win and we should beat the enemy so they would not have another appetite to attack us or an idea to attack us or to attack the free world. But again, it's not even of protecting our eastern borders of NATO, but it's just how about just the human nature? Just how about protecting kids and protecting women and protecting civilians? Killing people is not right. And we've been sitting by and watching, and I'm not the one to lecture the Poles on it in Poland, who have experienced during World War II extermination and gas chambers and all of their Jewish population destroyed while the whole world was watching. It is not right. It is not right. So what about, okay, we don't want to give them offensive weapons as MiGs right in the beginning of the war, Poland was forbidden. But how about defensive weaponry, such as to shoot down the Russian missiles that are flying, that are going to kill, again, Ukrainian infrastructure. Now the winter is coming; they're destroying. Everybody's Everybody's really afraid of their being frozen to death, and all those things. We can't just, as humanity, I don't think we can sit by and watch another year go by of destruction of entire nation. So I really don't understand what my government is trying to do and saying, well, no, it's escalation or it's this or that. That's one side of the story. The other side of the story, if God forbid I would be Putin, I would be sitting there and saying, you know what? NATO really got nothing. NATO are cowards and they can't get together and they can't agree on anything. And the only ones that are maybe trying to stand up to me are the Poles. But the rest of the NATO is really, it's empty. It's NATO. No action, talk only. That's what it stands for. And I'm sure Putin eating it up. That we have a very weak leadership in the White House, even if we have leadership. To be honest with you, we here in the United States, we don't even know who the president is at this point. We haven't seen him in a long time. We don't know if he's actually functioning. But
Mr. Tabak, let me just cut you off there to now ask you this. So, Russia's continued escalation through hybrid airspace, continuous attacks, and whatnot, of course, on critical infrastructure in Ukraine, on civilians as well. Now, in this context, Poland's request to intercept and neutralize missiles over Ukraine is both necessary and urgent as a mechanism to support Ukraine and secure NATO's frontline borders, right? Now, concern for securing NATO's frontline borders, or is this a mechanism to support Ukraine? Are these two things separate?
Well, again, I think it's, they're politicians, they're bureaucrats, so they have to use some kind of wording to say, well, we have to do this in order to secure us, in order to benefit ourselves. It's not all, it's like if you ever worked for the government agency or for the bureaucracy in the government, they always say, well, if we spend $1 billion now on something that's so stupid and useless, then we will be able to save like 100 years from now, $10 billion. They they always use this kind of terminology that really is functional. But I'd like to say that I think that Israel right now is taking a pretty good posture. They're saying, okay, we're not going to inform the United States on what we do or how we do. We have to protect ourselves. We have to protect the Western world. We have to protect our Western values of freedom and liberty and our independence and our security. I think that right now Poland is kind of is leaning towards that way and saying, you know what, maybe we should just stop cooperating with the United States. And there are probably many other countries that are saying maybe the United States cannot tell us and dictate us what to do. It is our security. And it appears that the United States government and administration, president administration, is not doing anything about it. They're actually playing.
And we will see, and of course, we will see how this situation will unfold, given the fact that in a few days, things might change, right, in the White House. Gary Tabak, former chief of staff at the NATO military liaison mission in Moscow, thank you so much for being with us here on Ukraine This Week on TVP World. Thank you for all your input.
Thank you for inviting me.
And now I invite you to an interview with Bogdan Nahailo, editor-in-chief of Kiev Post. Good evening, sir. Thank you so much for being with us here today on Ukraine This Week.
Hello.
So let's go straight into it, and particularly about Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelenskyy. Now, were Zelenskyy's demands regarding the victory plan prepared more for domestic use, to prepare society to start peace negotiations with the Russian Federation, to blame any concessions on Western allies who did not agree to use missiles or invite Ukraine to the North Atlantic Alliance?
No, I don't think it was aimed at the domestic audience. I think it was very much pitched to the outside world, particularly to Ukraine supporters. He was under pressure to be seen to be moving towards finding some kind of peaceful resolution, because it's very difficult to convince some countries, particularly those in BRICS and those that aren't favorably disposed towards the West, let alone Ukraine, that this war should continue until there's a victory by Ukraine and by its democratic supporters. They are all in favor of some kind of ceasefire, stopping the bloodshed, as they put it, regardless of whether 15-20% of Ukraine is occupied and the UN Charter is violated. So I think that was very important. Secondly, I think it was also to put pressure on Ukraine's, shall we say, ambivalent partners. Ambivalent in the sense that, yes, on the surface they are fully supportive, they are providing funds, they are providing arms, but at the same time, implicitly being involved in appeasement of Russia, of Putin, under the guise of saying we don't want escalation. Yes, we should take Putin seriously about waving his nuclear weapons around and threatening World War III. So there's that factor, and the other factor I think is to show that Ukraine is planning, or has a vision of how the war should end, that it's not just victory on the battlefield per se, but what goes with that, what elements should follow that. What is lacking, I think, what has been lacking, and for this Zelenskyy has been criticized, is the detail, that the plan that he offered at this stage, this is plan A, apparently there's going to be a B follower, that it's more of a, shall we say, wish list of what is needed from Ukraine's supporters, rather than the practical steps that Ukraine itself will take to ensure victory on the battlefield and to ensure a kind of peaceful transition to reconstruction, rebuilding, peace, security in the neighborhood.
What are ordinary Ukrainian citizens talking about this? How have they received this victory plan just a mere few weeks after Zelenskyy presented it?
I don't think there's been much discussion. Quite frankly, the discussion is not so much about what he has to say, but what is Washington saying, what is Berlin saying, what is Paris saying, what is London saying. they can rely to a large extent on what Warsaw is saying, the Baltic countries are saying, and now increasingly the Nordic countries and some others, the Netherlands. But I think the interest is not so much on what Zelenskyy is saying. They know that he is engaged in diplomacy slash PR work and sort of massaging, getting messages across, looking good, and not appearing to be desperate, though the element of desperation has crept in increasingly, but to look good on the surface as if we're in control of things as long as our partners understand and we have their full backing.
Speaking to reporters in Reykjavik on Wednesday, Zelenskyy said that one of Ukraine's many problems in fighting Russia is that arms aid promised by allies is arriving too late or not at all. Now, in the case of the United States, right, Ukraine's largest military backer, as much as 90% of the military aid approved by Congress for the 2024 fiscal year has yet to reach the battlefield. Now, U.S. State Department spokesperson Matthew Miller responded at a briefing on Wednesday. I just want to take you through that quote here, saying, "I'm not going to talk about that percentage. I would refer you to my colleagues in the Pentagon who are responsible for delivering aid to talk about the exact number that has been delivered. But if you look at the way we've structured the aid that we've provided and the way we've just approved now, significant disbursement authorities allows us to deliver aid to Ukraine in a timely manner." Now, sir, based on this, do we know the actual number of U.S. weapons that have been transferred into the hands of Ukrainian soldiers so far this year?
Well, first of all, let's say that sounds like a diplomatic gobbledygook. We say, in a structured manner, delivery. Newspapers are saying a trickle, as opposed to a flow or a flood of arms. And we don't know for sure, but I don't think President Zelenskyy would just, as we would put it, shoot his mouth off, particularly before an election. I think saying that publicly, suggests a very large degree of frustration, and B, I think the need to get the message home to the U.S. on the eve of the election, like, guys, I know you're busy with other things, but we are dying here and we are in a desperate situation. I mean, let's look at the facts. 7 months of delay this time, preceded by 8 months of delay. Remember when Congress was stymied and there was an 8 months delay? That's 15 months in which promised aid, 64 billion or whatever, was reduced to a trickle. 15 months out of how long have we been fighting? Almost 3 years, say 32 months, right? That's half of the war. Promised aid has not come in anywhere near the quantities that were promised by the states. So what is the impact on Ukraine, on the battlefield? What is the impact on defense of cities and infrastructure? And more importantly, or not importantly, but parallel to this, what is the impact on allies? Where is the leadership? Where is the reliability of the United States that Poland, Germany, Denmark, Lithuania, whoever have relied on traditionally? It really is a very poor showing by an administration that on the surface claims to be so fully behind Ukraine. Don't get me wrong. They've done a great job in supporting Ukraine, saying the right things and providing a substantial amount of aid. But per capita, compared to other countries, it's been nowhere near the quantities per capita that others have been given, let alone what has been promised. So very poor showing and very demoralizing. And in the context of the election, where all the criticism has been aimed at and disbelief aimed at Trump, that Trump is going to let the side down, he's going to let Europe down, he's going to let the free world down, etc., not just Ukraine. And suddenly we get these facts coming out that the Biden administration has continued very much in the kind of spirit of the Obama administration of the Democrats, who, great supporters of freedom, the democratic world, but when push came to shove, they've not really delivered, and that is alarming. That is alarming at this stage.
Let me shift you a little bit here to a new factor, a new issue in this conflict. North Korean troops now. So again, President Zelenskyy called Western allies to develop concrete solutions to provide additional support to Ukraine, right? This as North Korea prepares to engage Ukrainian forces on the battlefield. And U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken went to a press conference where he said that at least 8,000 North Korean troops have been deployed to Russia's Kursk region to take part in the war. Now, Zelenskyy also added that North Korean troops haven't really engaged yet in combat, but that it's a matter of days and not months. And once they're deployed, they will be pushed forward, suffering heavy losses as Russia seeks to minimize the mobilization of its own troops. Now, although we have seen some media outlets report the first clashes between Ukraine's army and North Korean soldiers in the Kursk region, what would be these concrete solutions that Zelenskyy is referring to, and is the West capable of these concrete solutions? And this, of course, does go back to just the initial answer that you gave, but just specifically regarding these North Korean troops, what can you tell us about that?
Look, I can't tell you more because we're waiting for concrete data. Are they actually there? Are they deployed? Are they in action? But the fact is that now nobody is denying what they were denying largely 2 weeks ago or 10 days ago when the Ukrainians said, look, North Koreans are coming, or they are already there. And initially it was, no, well, let's be sure this can't be so, etc. Now, I think that the factor here is that the Russians aren't messing around. They are taking great losses in manpower, and their approach to war, as traditionally since the 19th century, is send people into the meat grinder, not really value human life, but just take and win by these massive offensive of men going forward, regardless of the human cost and what casualties there will be. So now they need to beef up their own ranks. But the most important thing here is, again, the message is that Russia can get away with whatever it wants to do. This is a huge escalation, bringing in North Koreans, even if they're not on the front lines yet. Just as, using the Iranian missiles and drones has been, just as the secret weapons that we are told come from China, maybe not directly, but through various means. So there's one rule for Russia, and there's another rule for the democratic West supporting Ukraine. Oh, let's not do it, let's not touch Russia. I mean, the message, as you have probably registered on TVP World, is from the States, from Secretary of State Blinken and others, was, yes, it's legitimate for the Ukrainians to hit the North Koreans if they're engaged in battle, if they're deployed to fight the Ukrainians. But I'm sorry, we wait till the last minute, until they're there on the front line. Why aren't the Ukrainians given the capacity that they've been asking for, to take a defensive war, not a war of aggression, to invade and to hold on to Russian land, but to push the Russians out of Ukraine? Why aren't the Ukrainians given the right and the support to hit within Russia those bases, those centers from which the attacks are being launched? And it makes no sense. It
definitely
really,
a complex.
It really amounts to Ukraine. You're so heroic. You're so brave. But fight with one hand behind your back. We'll keep your hand warm here. We'll put some money in it.
A complex situation unfolding. Mr. Bogdan Nillo.
You use your sword while they use missiles against your cities and against infrastructure.
Thank you so much, Mr. Bogdan Nillo, editor-in-chief of Kiev Post, for being with us here today on Ukraine This Week. And that's all for this edition of Ukraine This Week. Join us again next week for another summary of all the latest events from the war in Ukraine. Thanks for watching and see you soon.